Okay, hi, my name is Martin. I'm going to speak on the topic of cybersecurity, in particular in relations to its importance to digital transformation. With digital transformation, organizations will likely be putting more of their system online, exposing them to risks, and hence the importance of cybersecurity to manage risks. I'm going to start with some statistics to set the context and also to remind us that as we speak, cyber threat actors are compromising system, and it's important that we do not ignore or neglect security, even as we are excited about digitally transforming our business. Now, technology is a dual-use, resource. Used for good, it brings about, innovations and benefit. Used for bad, it can result in financial loss and even affect livelihood. The need for cybersecurity needs to be baked into the digital transformation process, so that we take care of cybersecurity right from the start. A recent report, indicated that APAC, Asia Pacific, is one of the most targeted region, due in part to its rapid adoption of technology. Victims include those businesses in IT, in finance, including government agencies. Not surprisingly, ransomware is the top threat. Now, businesses needs to and can and must include cybersecurity in your planning for digital transformation. Otherwise, you turn something that is good, digital transformation, into a potential digital nightmare. Now, governments around the world have recognized the benefit of digitally transforming their economy, as well as their businesses, and they have put up programs to help their businesses jumpstart their digital transformation journey. For example, Singapore have our Smart Nation initiative, and governments in India and Malaysia have similar programs. Cyber criminals will go where the money is, okay, and not surprisingly, digital transformation have attracted their interest, because they are looking for opportunities to make some quick money. Now, as a business, you must ensure that you do not make it easy for them to compromise your data, to hold you to ransom, or to compromise the system and use them to attack other business. Now, for digital transformation to work, all the necessary stakeholders need to work together. So we have government putting up national level programs like what I mentioned earlier. Businesses need to invest in cybersecurity, and individuals like you and me need to know what to do and also what not to do. So what is cybersecurity? We are concerned that our data, systems, network, and applications are subjected to risks. So what do we need to do? Okay, cybersecurity in a nutshell is about how do we manage cybersecurity risks to a level whereby businesses can still continue to do what they need to do while not overly exposing themselves to risks. Now, as you can tell from this slide, cybersecurity encompasses a lot of elements. Okay, so it is, and not just data security. Okay, so it is important that when you talk about security, okay, you need to look in totality all the elements that is shown on this slide. Cybersecurity needs to be baked into your digital transformation journey. It should, in my opinion, serve as the what you call the cybersecurity underlying layer, okay, in order to secure a digital transformation journey. So that is something that you need to bear in mind when you are thinking about going through a digital transformation journey. So let's look at some examples of consideration, cybersecurity consideration, for digital transformation. Now, the importance of cybersecurity for digital transformation needs to get the correct level of attention. Okay, so right at the top level, at the C-suite, at the board of directors level. Okay, so they need to set the tone, and more importantly, they need to give you the correct, kind of resources, okay, in order to do it right. Digital transformation will result in risk, okay, and therefore there's a need to do risk assessment. To address the identified risks, you need to put together some strategy, a cybersecurity strategy in particular, to address those risks. With digital transformation, a business is going to be collecting more data, customer data, for example, okay, or you'll be putting more data online. There's a duty of care for organization to make sure that they manage those data properly, securely, and from a privacy point of view. If you're operating a business in Singapore, there's the PDPA, okay, which requires organizations to take on certain obligations, the Personal Data Protection Act. If your business operates in the EU, there's the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, which requires you to comply. Now, a vendor, or rather a business going through digital transformation, will need to work with vendors and third-party service providers. Okay, their cybersecurity posture will indirectly impacts your organization's digital, cybersecurity posture. Take for example, okay, as part of your digital transformation journey, you may decide to adopt cloud. Okay, and you decide to put your customer data on the cloud. Okay, so how do you know that the cloud service provider will be able to secure your customer data? Okay, thankfully, there are industry best practices and certification, okay, that can attest to the cybersecurity posture of cloud service provider. Incident response and recovery. Now, there's no such thing as perfect or 100% security. Now, in the cybersecurity field, we always say there's this phrase that we use. It's not about if, it's when. When an incident happens, are you ready to address the incident, or there will be chaos and panic? So what is important is that your organization needs to have an incident response plan. You identify the necessary stakeholders. They know what to do when an incident happens. Beyond developing the plan, it's also important that you test the plan. Okay, if your business operates in a regulated sector, take for example, banking and finance, the Monetary Authority of Singapore will require you, okay, to develop an incident response plan and to exercise the plan regularly as well. Continuous monitoring and testing. Now, we have a saying that if you are not watching, you do not know whether people are doing bad things to you, and you always be in a reactive mode. The only time you know when things go wrong is when you have to deal with an actual incident. So monitoring is about actively watching your environment, your infrastructure, for example, for signs and symptoms of bad actors or threat actors trying to do bad things to you. What is important is if you watch it, hopefully you can catch it early enough and do something about it before it turns into an actual incident. Now, testing, okay, is about trying to find weaknesses, weak spots in your infrastructure and do something about it before an actual attacker or threat actors, discover it and exploit it. And we typically do that through two means: vulnerability assessment, or what we call VA. Okay, so you scan your environment, okay, because if you don't, threat actors are doing it anyway. Okay, you scan your environment, you discover weak spots, you patch it. So that's why the importance about patching your systems whenever there are vulnerability discovered. Penetration testing, or PT, or the other term that we commonly use is called red teaming. You put on the hat of an attacker and try and penetrate your own system. Okay, it's either you do that or the attacker will do it to you and then steal your data and hold you to ransom. So you decide what you want. Okay, so how do you do cybersecurity in a systematic manner? Okay, I will recommend that in order to do cybersecurity in a systematic manner, we should come up with a cybersecurity strategy. So in this part of the presentation, I will talk about what is a cybersecurity strategy, how do we go about developing one. So what is a cybersecurity strategy? It is an articulation of an organization's cybersecurity outcome in support, again, this point is important, in support of the business goals and objectives. So we do not develop a cybersecurity strategy just for the fun of it. Okay, in this case, what is the business goals and outcome? Okay, it is to digitally transform the organization. So in order for the strategy to be useful, you will be translated into some plan of action, okay, to raise the cybersecurity posture of the organization and the resilience of the cybersecurity of the organization. Now, the strategy will be technology agnostic. Okay, so this is not the place to specify I will use this particular technology, this particular product. The typical time line for a strategy is about 3 to 5 years. But again, this is another important point. You need to review the strategy on an annual basis. Why? Because as we speak, some threat actor somewhere is probably discovering or have discovered some weakness somewhere in some common products that we use, and is going to exploit it. So your strategy needs to be reviewed on an annual basis, to take care or take note of new threats that may come up. What may work 1 year ago, okay, in terms of a cybersecurity control may not work now. The last point will be about, the strategy needs to be an important decision item for the board. Okay, why so? It needs to get the endorsement, the chop of approval from the board, okay, to say that this is the right thing to do. And again, more importantly, okay, the board needs to agree to provide the necessary funding. Okay, so that is an important part, because without the necessary funding, you cannot execute whatever programs and initiatives that is required. Let's look at cybersecurity. Cybersecurity can be looked at in terms of layers, starting right from the top. Layer 1 will be the strategy, the what and the why. Why are we doing cybersecurity? Which I've said earlier must be in support of business goals and objectives. The strategy in itself is not good enough. You need to translate the strategy into an architecture, a blueprint of sort, okay, which will then, get into the details about how do you design a secure system, network and architecture. How do you protect the data? Okay, what kind of governance instrument do you need to put in place, be it policies, standards or procedures, or even the adoption of certain frameworks? How do you protect your data? Now the architecture will then further, that's layer 2 right now, will be further translated into the programs. Okay, that's where we get into the technology. Okay, what technology to use, what specific controls to use, where we start to identify who are the people that will need to execute the programs, when will the programs need to be done, how much money will we need. Okay, so that's where the budget comes in. So cybersecurity, in the sense of supporting digital transformation, needs to be observed or needs to be viewed at from these 3 layers. Now this slide, just to give you a sense, are examples of outcome that you can put in your digital strategy. You will note that the statements are crafted in general terms, okay, without specifying the means of achieving those outcomes. Just to remind you, these are examples, okay? Every organization will have to adapt or come up with your own version of what are those outcomes. Now, the outcomes will be supported by strategic objectives. Okay, the objectives gives a next layer of clarity in terms of, what do we want to do? How do you achieve those outcomes? Take, for example, if one of the outcomes is to protect the organization assets from cyber attack, a relevant objective will be to adopt a risk-based asset protection regime. Okay, but to be clear, it may not be a situation where it is a one-to-one kind of thing. So a outcome may have multiple objectives and vice versa. Again, these are examples. As an organization, when you go through your own cybersecurity, or rather when you go through your own digital transformation journey, you need to adapt this accordingly. Now, let's talk about the design of architecture and the development of programs and initiatives. When it comes to that, okay, we need to be guided by certain cybersecurity principles. Okay, and this slide is not exhaustive, just to give you a sense of what are some of the key ones you need to bear in mind. Starting with the CIA triad. Okay, it talks about the confidentiality, integrity, and availability in terms of data. Okay, and in terms of how you secure your system, network, and application. Now, when we talk about rapid adaptability, it is about, and it bears reminding all of us that the cyber threat landscape is always changing. Whatever controls you put in place 1 year ago, okay, which may be able to address the risk at that point in time, okay, may no longer be effective. It may need to be supplemented, or it may need to be totally replaced. So your strategy, your programs, your architecture needs to be nimble enough to be able to address that. Now, next point about defense in depth. So this is a very important point. It's about having multiple layers of defenses. Okay, essentially you're putting roadblocks, okay, in front of the attacker. The idea is that, okay, if one layer of your protection goes down, there's yet another layer that will provide the protection. And if you are watching, okay, remember I said earlier about continuous monitoring. Okay, if you are watching your infrastructure, okay, hopefully one of the layers will raise an alert, and you as a cyber defender, will catch it before it becomes an actual incident. So defense in depth is a very important cybersecurity principle which need to be borne in mind. Diversity is about not deploying the same kind of cybersecurity controls or technology in all layers of your protection. Why is that important? Because if an attacker were to identify a weakness in that control or in that product and exploit it, all of your layers of protection are affected. So this slide is an illustration of how do you join up the dots, okay, linking a strategy to the program and the initiative. Take for example, maybe one of your outcomes is the ability to monitor and be forewarned of impending attacks. Now, a potential program, and this may not be the only program. Take for example, a potential program could be to have a detection and monitoring program covering critical system, network, and applications. So what could be a potential initiative, to under that program, for example? Now, you could, for example, stand up a 24/7 security operations center, or what we call a SOC. Now, this SOC will be manned on a 24/7 basis by security analysts. It will ingest logs from the various security controls that you deploy in your multiple layers. Remember what we said, defense in depth, okay, including endpoints, okay, and then your analysts will be doing threat hunting and threat analysis, okay, and if they see something funny, okay, they can do something about it before it becomes a real incident. So this gives us an example of how you link the strategy to programs and to initiatives. So your next question will be, well, okay, cybersecurity sounds like an interesting thing to do. So how do I even start? Okay, are there examples or are there frameworks that I can use to help me jumpstart this? Well, as it turns out, there is actually. Okay, there's this NIST cybersecurity framework. So what in the world is NIST? NIST is a US government agency. It stands for the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's a US government agency whose purpose in life is to create standards and framework for the US government. Okay, but they have kindly make it available to the rest of the world. And this cybersecurity framework is widely adopted both by companies in the private sector as well as government agencies around the world. Okay, let me just quickly take you through this framework. By the way, the current version is 1.1. It was released in 2018, I believe. It's available on the link on this slide. 2.0 is coming up early next year. But let's look at what this NIST cybersecurity framework does. So there are 5 functions, or what they call cores there. Okay, starting with identify. Identify what? Identify your critical assets. What is it that attackers or bad actors will want to do to you? For example, your database, which contains your customer data. Okay, that will be what we call the crown jewel. Okay, where attackers will want to go after, steal the data and hold you ransom. Identify the risks to your infrastructure, and that's where you do your risk assessment. Protect. Okay, you talk about what to protect. I'm sure you want to protect your data for sure. So for example, you may want to encrypt your data. Of course, there are many other things you can do. So I'm just giving you some examples. If you deep dive into the document, they will tell you other things. Detect. Remember I said about monitoring? So you may want to deploy detection mechanism, intrusion detection system, intrusion prevention system, to detect whether there are funny things that are happening. Okay, attackers trying to do funny things to your environment. Respond. Remember I said earlier about don't assume that you will never ever need to deal with a cybersecurity incident, and you need to develop an incident response plan. So here they are reminding you again that you need to make sure that you have the ability to respond when an incident happens. So developing an incident response plan. Recover. Okay, having a business continuity and disaster recovery plan. So as you can see, IPDRR is very logical. Okay, so this is an example. Okay, if you're talking about, okay, I don't know how to start, okay, with developing a cybersecurity strategy, this is one potential reference which you can use. Another question you may ask is, well, this sounds like a lot of work, I'm going to invest a lot of time and money, potentially a lot of money, what's my ROI? Okay, so let me give you 2 examples, okay? In terms of, what do you call ROI, in terms of cost, for example, okay, yes, cybersecurity is always viewed as cost, okay, but can you imagine, okay, if you suffer a cybersecurity incident, let's say ransomware, and then you get sued by your customer, the amount of cybersecurity investment that you put in might be much less than the amount of money that you need to pay to your customer. So first point, okay, in terms of cost saving. Okay, second point, in terms of competitive advantage. Okay, if your business is known to take cybersecurity seriously, okay, it might serve as a form of loyalty. Okay, your customer may want to stay with you because, oh, I think it's this customer takes cybersecurity very seriously. They have a cybersecurity strategy. In terms of business partners, okay, you will also attract business partners who say that, well, okay, I think this is the correct company to work with because they take cybersecurity very, very seriously. So those are potentially two of the ROIs, okay, for lack of a better term, okay, in terms of demonstrating that your organization takes cybersecurity seriously. Okay, let's talk about risks. Okay, cybersecurity is a mechanism, okay, to address risks, and with digital transformation there will be risks. For this part of my presentation, I will quickly go through what does it mean to manage risks, okay, and what are some of the risks that an organization going through digital transformation, okay, will encounter throughout this process. To be clear, not all the risks will be cyber in nature. There will be other forms of risks. Okay, so this is the general risk management process, starting of course with identifying the risks. Okay, who are the people that can do bad things to your business? Okay, do bad things to what? To your crown jewel, the asset, your database, or and so forth. Okay, and with that you can construct what we call risk scenarios. Okay, in the construction of the risk scenarios, you will need inputs. So what kind of inputs? You can either get inputs from open source. Okay, there are open source information on what kind of threats out there. Okay, targeting certain sector, for example, or you can pay money and subscribe to commercial cyber threat intel, or you get some experts to advise you. Now, once you have those, risk scenarios, okay, you can then start to do your analysis. What is the likelihood of this risk scenario coming true, and what will be the impact, okay, to your organization if this risk were to materialize? And then you compute the risk. Risk in its current form is taken as a function of likelihood and impact, and then you compare the risk against the risk appetite and scenario of the organization, of your organization. Those risks that are beyond your risk appetite and scenario needs to be further assessed in terms of how you treat those risks. Now, in general, there are 4 ways, okay, to address risks. 1, you accept the risk. It is within your organization's risk appetite and scenario, and tolerance. There's nothing more you need to do. Your existing control works. 2, you avoid the risk. Stop doing whatever you are doing. Okay, why? Because the risk is too high. It is beyond your organization risk appetite and tolerance. Okay, there's no control that's available to manage the risk, or the control is just too expensive to implement. 3, you transfer or you share the risk. That means you buy cyber insurance. Okay, get another a cyber company, or rather insurance company, to share the risk with you. 4, you mitigate the risk. It is still important for you to do whatever activity you are doing, for example, digital transformation. Okay, but you need to put in controls, mitigation controls, okay, to bring the risk down, okay, to within the risk appetite and tolerance of your organization. The remaining steps in the risk management process is about getting into the specifics of how an organization will manage the risk, okay, in terms of implementing controls, okay, in the form of programs and initiatives as part of your cybersecurity strategy. Remember, I said earlier, cybersecurity, there are 3 layers: the strategy, okay, and then moving on to the programs, okay, the architecture and the programs and initiative. Okay, the strategy will have to come up with all those programs and initiatives, and those programs and initiatives will address the risks that you decide to take on. All this risk information needs to be captured accurately, okay, and communicated to the relevant relevant stakeholders, and we call that document a risk register. Every identified risk needs to have a risk owner, okay, who is going to be accountable for addressing the risk completely. Now, I'm going to go into what are the risks that an organization going through a digital transformation will encounter. Okay, in general, an organization going through digital transformation will go through 3 stages. Okay, the initiation stage, the implementation, and then the steady state. To be clear, not all the risks will be cyber in nature, but I think it's important that you get a sense of it. Starting with the initiation phase. So strategic risks. To be clear, digital transformation is a major undertaking for an organization. So it's not something about following the Joneses. Okay, just because another company is doing it, you feel that okay, I think maybe I should just do it, But without a proper strategy, I don't know what you're going to transform your business to. So having a proper strategy is going to be important. Organizational risk. Now, for digital transformation to be successful or to have a chance of being successful, the entire organization needs to go along. Digital transformation will potentially result in a reorganization of your business, okay, of your company. Okay, jobs may need to be redesigned. People may lose their job. Okay, this may result in resistance, okay, unhappiness, which may impact the journey. Financial risks. It goes without saying that you need to make sure that you have the necessary financial, capability to be able to go through the digital transformation process and to sustain it, not just to initiate it, but to sustain it and hopefully get to the steady state. Okay, so having sufficient budget is necessary as part of your planning, process. Implementation. So cybersecurity risk comes up here. Okay, and in particular, like I said earlier, you're going to be collecting customer data, for example. Okay, and it's important that you manage it properly. Otherwise, this risk about data breaches and cybersecurity attack will come up. But for cybersecurity, it is not just about data security. Okay, like I said earlier, system, network, and application. Those are the other cybersecurity risk areas that needs to be, taken into consideration as part of your overall cybersecurity strategy. Technology risk. As part of digital transformation, there will be a need for you to repurpose, okay, your existing technology stack, okay, to incorporate new technology. Okay, there might be issue of incompatibility, okay, which may introduce some delay into your implementation process. Project risk. Okay, as much as you can plan, okay, there might be unforeseen issues that may cropped up during the implementation. Okay, some of the risks that we talked about earlier, okay, as part of the initiation. Okay, so you need to factor in buffers, okay, when you talk about implementing your digital transformation. Capability risks. Okay, as part of digital transformation, your existing staff, okay, may need to pick up new skills and knowledge which they currently may not have. Okay, so that in itself may also introduce delays into your timeline. And finally, if you have gone through initiation and you have gone through implementation and you are still there, the business is still there, okay, you've reached the steady state phase. But that doesn't mean you are done. Okay, there are still risks that you need to worry about. For example, maintenance risk. Okay, you need a bunch of people, especially if you're adopting cutting edge technology, who is able to keep the infrastructure humming away. Okay, to make sure that your business, the underlying infrastructure that supports your digitally transformed business is properly maintained. So maintenance risk is one area. Technology risk shows up again. So it's not about just adopting technology, at that point of implementation. In order to keep up with your competitors, okay, you got to make sure that you continue to adopt new technology as new one comes along. For example, what's the in thing right now? Generative AI. Okay, everybody, is talking about it. If your business is not adopting it, do you need to adopt it? Do you have people who knows how to deal with it? So technology risk. Because if you don't keep up, you become obsolete. Scalability risk. If your business is doing very well, okay, business is good, and everybody around the world is buying your product, your service, you're making widgets or whatever, okay, then you got to make sure that your infrastructure is able to support the scale of your business. So scalability risk. Adoption risk. You need to continue, your business need to continue to innovate, okay, to come up with new products and services. So your existing customers is prepared to stay with you and you can attract new customers. So that's a quick sweep in terms of what are the risks across the three potential stages of digital transformation. Okay, rounding up, okay, let me talk about the need for skilled cybersecurity personnel. So we said cybersecurity is needed in order for secure digital transformation. Okay, and we need to develop a cybersecurity strategy, okay, with programs and initiatives. So here's the thing, okay, in order to be able to come up with the strategy, okay, come up with the programs, implement the programs and the initiative, you do need people who are skilled, who have the necessary knowledge to be able to do all that. Okay, so for this section of my presentation, okay, I'm going to briefly talk about how we can go about doing that. Now, a strategy need not necessarily be at the organization level. You can have country level strategy. Singapore's National Cybersecurity Strategy was launched in 2016 and it was updated in 2021. The US launched their National Cybersecurity Strategy in March this year. Now, if you examine the strategic pillars and the foundational enablers and all that, they are essentially the outcomes for the two strategy. In particular, okay, I want to draw your attention to Singapore's foundational enabler 2 and the US pillar 4. Okay, if you examine these two in detail, you'll find something similar. So what is the similarity? Okay, you will find that both the US strategy and Singapore strategy highlighted the need to boost the pool of cybersecurity, trained cybersecurity personnel. So what is that important? Okay, because you do need people with the necessary skills and knowledge in order to be able to do that. Okay, to do what? Okay, to be able to implement the programs and the initiatives. And I said earlier, the strategy needs to be supported by programs and initiatives. One example of a program, okay, or initiative that has come up is the recently launched, as part of Singapore strategy, the Talent Development Fund. Okay, the National University of Singapore has partnered with the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore, okay, to come up with a talent development fund. To do what? To build a pipeline of cybersecurity talent. ISS, as a premier training institution, stands ready to step forward to support Singapore government's national cybersecurity strategy. Okay, we have a portfolio of cybersecurity certification and in-house developed programs, okay, that will be able to increase the pool of cybersecurity trained personnel. Okay, to round up, okay, to conclude, okay, in the years to come, okay, for a business to thrive, to digitally transform themselves is inevitable. I think the key thing is you need to do it in a secure manner, and it bears repeating that cybersecurity is important. The relationship between cybersecurity and digital transformation has to be a symbiotic one. Okay, you can see, cybersecurity as providing the underlying layer, the underlying fabric, and you have digital transformation sitting on top, okay, throughout the journey. Digital transformation will result in risks because businesses are going to be, collecting data, putting more data, online and all that. So having a robust risk management regime or process as part of the cybersecurity strategy is imperative. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
We will now take questions from the audience. Please type your questions into the Q&A section of the chat.
Oh, hi. Right. This is Martin again. Okay, I have a question coming up. It's about, is cybersecurity distinct from information security? Now, that's a good question. You see, in the early days, we talk about information security. But increasingly, as the internet becomes more popular, cybersecurity, becomes the in thing right now. But if you want to draw a distinction, cybersecurity when people talk about cybersecurity, a lot of it has to do with the internet. Okay, being concerned about if we were to expose the system to the internet and all that. Okay, whereas information security needs to be, or rather has a lot to deal with IT systems. Okay, but right now, if you ask me personally, from my experience working in this field for a while, the distinction is blurring to some extent. In order for cybersecurity to be done correctly, the IT security part of things needs to be done, well as well. Okay, they kind of need to work together, because if you look at it, if you were to, kind of peel the onion kind of thing. If you look behind, systems and all that, systems that are supporting, the services that we put online. Okay, if you look behind, what are the things behind? They're all the IT systems. Okay, that's why I said earlier about system, network, and applications. Okay, you need to deal with those properly, in order for the cyber part of things to be secure. Yeah. So that will be my take on cybersecurity, and information security. Yeah, I hope that answers that question. Yeah, thank you. You are welcome. Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to see the question. Okay, I have a question that is coming up. Let me just read the question so that everybody can. Okay, the question that I'm seeing right now is, should cybersecurity capability be built in-house or procured as a service for securing digital transformation? Now, so I think that's an important question, which organization that's thinking about digital transformation may have in mind. Okay, so okay, it's the typical, it depends. Okay, so why do I say it depends? No, so traditionally, okay, let me answer the question. I think there's another question that just popped out. Let me answer the question about cybersecurity capabilities to be built in-house or procured first before I come back to the question. So on the question about capabilities procure or built in-house, okay, my point will be, if it's procuring, okay, both whether procuring or building it in-house, there will be costs involved. Okay, the distinction is, if you procure, okay, then you might be subjected to, in a sense, at the mercy of the service provider. Okay, if if it's something very special, then they could charge you whatever they want. It could be at their mercy. Okay, but in a sense that if you procure, then you don't need to carry an in-house team, in-house headcount, okay, of cybersecurity people. Okay, if you are buying as a service, and at any point in time, you can just terminate the service, and then the cost item goes away. Okay, and you can do that if you decide to procure, is because you don't think cybersecurity is a capability that your organization wants to build in-house. Okay, but if you decide to build in-house, the advantage of it is, you are not reliant on a service provider. You have the capability in-house, and you can use it to innovate and do whatever you want with it. Okay, it is still a cost, yes, but the difference is that, you're no longer, kind of dependent on the service provider. They can charge you an arm and a leg, if they wish to. At the end of the day, it also depends on the customer that you have. Okay, if you are providing a service to a sensitive customer, okay, they may insist that that the cybersecurity capability cannot be outsourced. That means you cannot buy service. You must have the capability yourself in order for you to provide a service. I won't go into detail what sensitive customer would mean. It could be maybe government agencies or whatever that requires cybersecurity capability to be from the organization that they buy services from. So you cannot like, okay, I'm buying it from a third party. So that will be a consideration, okay, in terms of deciding whether you build in-house, okay, or you procure, okay. So let me come back to the question about, is technology foresighting advisable for a national cybersecurity roadmap? Okay, when you say technology foresighting, okay, I will take it that you are trying to anticipate, okay, and to see, okay, what else should a national cybersecurity roadmap be looking at? If I take that as the assumption, then I would say to the extent possible, yes, by all means. Okay, take for example, okay, and I also mentioned in my presentation that a roadmap, the duration is typically 3 to 5 years. Okay, so how much can you project, okay, within the 3 to 5 years? Okay, but even if you attempt to project 3 to 5 years, the advice is that on a year-to-year basis, on an annual basis, okay, you will need to review. Okay, so like for example, our national cybersecurity strategy. Okay, at that time when CSA came out with it, generative AI was not the in thing right now. Okay, so they reviewed it or they updated it in 2021. Okay, did they factor in generative AI and the fact that ChatGPT, okay, we all keep saying that ChatGPT can be used to help businesses to do the right thing. Okay, but if you have been following the news, ChatGPT has been used for malware creator to create better malware. Okay, malware that can be not detectable by whatever controls we put in place. Okay, so yes, I would say the answer is to the extent possible, a national cybersecurity strategy should try and predict, to say that, okay, you know what, we anticipate that whatever, okay, is going to be a big thing moving forward in the next 2 years. Okay, and therefore we should build the capability, okay, to be able to deal with it when the threat becomes real. Okay, we can anticipate it now. Okay, if we can plan for it through training, through whatever, okay, or through R&D, by all means, do it. But are we going to be right all the time, or can we predict everything? Obviously, the answer is not, I hope that answers your question. Okay, I have a question that says, how would you suggest the metrics for measuring digital transformation in cybersecurity? That's a good question. Okay, right now there isn't any standard metrics for measuring the success for digital transformation in terms of cybersecurity. Okay, although there isn't anything, I would suggest that from my perspective is, how will we know that cybersecurity is supporting digital transformation? Okay, I would say that we can use, how do we measure the success? Okay, in terms of, is cybersecurity enabling the organization to successfully meet the outcome of what it is trying to do in digital transformation? In what form? Okay, in the form of for example, okay, in terms of, is it suffering from any catastrophic incident, for example? So that is a very clear, again, if you've been following the news, every other day you're hearing about ransomware. Okay, so if an organization transform itself, and put data online or collect customer information, is it suffering from data breach, data exfiltration, ransomware incident? Okay, if it is, then what is the cause of it? Okay, to be clear, not all incident is because of negligence on the part of the organization. Sometimes, it's because of unforeseen thing. Like for example, an attacker may file the term we use is a 0 day. It means that even the technology provider is not aware of the vulnerability, because the attacker is actively looking for a way in. Okay, so if you ask me, are there good matrices that we can use right now, KPIs that we can use right now to say whether cybersecurity is effective in supporting digital transformation. There isn't. Okay, it's about, as the cybersecurity defender supporting the organization that's going through digital transformation. Okay, we need to, through the programs that we put in place as part of the strategy, okay, go through the process of like what I suggested earlier, the identify, protect, detect, response, and recover. Okay, follow that process. Okay, that is a means for us to what I would call, okay, a defensible position in terms of saying that, okay, as far as the organization is concerned, the cybersecurity team, okay, is doing the right thing. Okay, and I also made a point that even if you are doing that, does that mean that you will not have any cybersecurity incident? Obviously not. Okay, yeah. So that will be my my take on that. Yeah. Okay, the next question is how would cybersecurity be effective by emergent tech like AI? Okay, again a very good question. There's consideration about how could AI be used for doing bad things. Like I mentioned earlier about there are versions of ChatGPT that is used for creating undetectable malware. Okay. Again, I give you another example. Okay, there are governments around the world are very concerned about the use of AI, for bad things. The U.S. government, okay, recently have just released a document. I mentioned earlier NIST, okay, was asked to produce a document by the U.S. government, okay, in terms of guidance to the U.S. government agencies on the secure use of AI. Okay, what are the kind of things, best practices they should put in place, okay, to ensure that AI, if it's going to be adopted by the government, U.S. government for that matter, okay, can be done in a secure manner. Are we there yet? The answer is obviously not. Okay, so these are initial days, okay, in terms of what are the best practices. But I'm sure the field of AI, okay, is still progressing. I mean, right now we are talking about ChatGPT 4, and then GPT 4 Pro, and Plus and whatever. Okay, new capabilities and all that is going to come. Okay, and cyber defenders like us, okay, we have our job cut out for us, okay. We need to keep up. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. Okay, if no more questions, okay, sorry, there's a question just come in, yeah. Is there any cybersecurity laws that we need to comply with? Now, when you talk about cybersecurity law, okay, so in particular, let's say for example, data privacy. Okay, I mentioned earlier in my presentation is as part of digital transformation, you'll be collecting data. Okay, customer data and all that. And so you put up a web form, for example, you collect customer information and all that. From a privacy point of view, Singapore has the PDPA, Personal Data Protection Act. So that is one law in particular that you need to comply with. Okay, if you are in the critical sectors, for example, in Singapore, okay, the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore has a code of practice. Okay, there's a Cybersecurity Act, okay, which requires the critical infocom infrastructure operators to comply. Okay, so those are examples of laws. So that is Singapore in particular. Okay, in some countries in this region, or even for example in the EU, okay, the equivalent of Singapore's PDPA is the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. That is for EU countries. So again, if your business needs to operate in the EU, then you got to make sure that when you handle data privacy, you need to worry about that. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, if there are no more questions, thank you very much. I hope the session has been helpful. Yeah, thank you for your time. Bye.